Okay. Now our today's important topic is HTTP module of the node. This one. What's that? HTTP module of the node. How HTTP module exactly works in the node. That part we are going to see today. Okay. Now before moving ahead, let us discuss what is HTTP. What is HTTP? Now HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol, it's a text transfer. Remember that HTTP is request and response model. HTTP is what? Request and response model. So you have client and you have server. You have client, you have server. Client is going to request, server is going to respond. So your HTTP supports request and response model. Means you need to make some request, then server is going to give you some response. Let us see. So if you see this works on the HTTP. Can you see this URL works on the HTTP? Means this nodejs.org server is having capability of serving HTTP request. Okay, let's inspect that, and the network, let's try to refresh it, and can you see all these are HTTP requests? If you see here, all these are HTTP requests. Consider that this main.js headers, when you talk about request, remember that any request would be having header. Whatever request you will have, that request would be having header, or this is a complete request and this is the response that you will get. So this request and response are having body, header, it is having a typical structure. So request response are in the typical structure, and that structure real time you can see this. A request header, can you see? There are a lot of request headers. There are a lot of request headers. Then whenever you pass the request to the server, by means of header, you pass some extra information. Can you see user agent is one of the header that you pass. Referrer is another header that you can pass. Accept encoding, accept language, accept, these are some headers that you can pass. Then method, now we will discuss what do you mean by this. So this is a get method, meaning that you are wanting something from the server. Now if you go here, HTTP verbs, now see, this is a nice document available on the HTTP. What is HTTP? What do you mean by HTTP? All the things has been explained nicely on the Mozilla developer website. I'll share this link with you guys so you can see that whenever you can get time. Just read this document properly. Okay, overview of the HTTP and client server protocol and other thing, right? They have defined over here. Now HTTP headers, HTTP request methods, this is what we want to see. Means what I discussed, this method here is something called as get. Well, there are different HTTP methods, and what are these type? Get mainly used. Get is there, post is there, put is there, delete is there. We use these methods primarily, but there are a lot of methods that can be used behind the scene, or we can use for different purpose. Now it is saying that it is a terminology that client can send a request in these many ways. That request can be get request, that request can be head request, that can be post request, put request, delete request, connect request, options request, trace request, and patch request. Which means that client can send these many requests. Client can send these many requests. Means your server can perform operations related to these things. Means, let me give you example. What do you mean by get? If you want to get something from the server, you are going to use what? Get. But before that, can you see get method request a representation of specified resource. Specified what? Resource. Now here also they have used the term called as resource. Here also they have used term called as, can you see, delete specified resource, get specified resource. Here you are going to post entity to the specified resource, right? Now before moving ahead, these are the HTTP requests. Means clients can request server by means of these requests. But we need to worry about what do we mean by word resource. This word resource. Even sometimes I'll show you. Any repository we can try. If you try to GitHub is not working. Okay. Now if I try hello, can you see? Here you get something called as 404, right? You get this page called as 404. This web page, this is not the web page you are looking for, right? And 404. Now if I inspect it, network, and just try to refresh it again, can you see 404? If you see hello, you are getting 404. Let's check the request headers. These are the request related things. This much data you have passed from the request, and get request, and here you can say my name / hello, and in the response body, in the response you can see here some unwanted page. Here in short you can see some unwanted page, and here you can see 404. Okay. Now why I am getting this 404, or many of the time you can see 404 resource not found. You might have seen that also, 404 resource not found. So what exactly this 404 means, what exactly resource means, we will discuss. Now I am going to talk about the server part right now. Just do this thing and consider that this is my big server. Okay, and into this server, remember that this is a physical computer or cloud VM, whatever it is, but this is a computer, remember that. And on that there is a file system. There is a file system, right, where we store some data, something like that. Okay, and it's a computer, and we have, and if this computer needs to be work as a web server, we need to install a web server application over here. We need to install what? Web server application. So here I can say file system, and here I can say web server app. Now this app can be your Apache web server. This app can be Nginx, whatever. This app can be your Apache server. This app can be Nginx, right? This is a file system. We might store a DB over here, something like that, right? Then what you do, you create a web application. Right? This is my web app. You can say, sorry, this is my web app. And in a web app you write different functions. Means if you want to access this image, you write a function called as some function that accesses this image, right, and returns this image to web app, right, from here, and that image would be transferred to your client from the web app. Right, now this is another thing. If you want to save the data, you need to call this function. If you want to delete the data, you need to call this function. If you want to update the data, you need to call this function, right? If you want to get list of all available employees, whatever, you can call this thing. If you want to see particular employee, you will call this function, and this function might communicate with the database, or they might communicate with the file system. No problem over there, right? Now see, this computer has got one IP address. This complete computer has got one IP address. Okay, and this IP might have pointed to one of the domain, right, mydomain.com. So what happens when you do mydomain.com? It is going to resolve the particular IP address, and by means of that it is going to enter in a web app. And by means of web app it will go to it will enter in a web server, and by means of web server it is going to enter in a web app, and by means of web app it is going to reach the particular function, and by means of function it is going to reach to this particular things on the file system, right? So whenever you want to have something from the file system of the server, you need to write a web app, and into that web app you would be writing one function that would be communicating with the particular thing. Now you might ask a question, how this client is going to call this function, correct? How this client is going to call this function. Okay, now what happens, every web app would be, I'll tell you now. Let's write a URL here. I can create one URL, http, right, / your IP or domain / name of the web app. Your every web app would be having some name, web app, and inside that you can write say hello img. So I want to get hello img. So what happens, your client is going to point to the IP. It will go to this web server app. When your client say that IP, your client will reach to the web server app. From the web server app it identifies the web app, right? It identifies what? Web app. Web server knows how many web applications are running, and you have given name of web app over here. From this web app, right, from this name your web server enters into the particular application, and this thing is called as name of the resource. So consider that this is that image hello img. Means what you have done, a path from your URL, path inside your URL, you have mapped to one of the function. What I am saying, path in a URL you have mapped to one of the function. Means if you want to call this function, you just hit this URL. Means what? Your one URL is mapped with one of the function in a web app, right? And now see, this hello img is going to communicate with one of the image on the file system, right? So this thing is called as resource. Either this thing is called as a resource or straight away this file is called as resource, right? Sometimes this web app may access these URLs directly or these images PDFs directly sometimes, but that's not a good idea, right? So resource means what? One of the entity on the server which is having importance, like the database, like this file, like this PDF. So this thing is called as URL, which is nothing but uniform resource locator. Remember that, uniform resource locator. It is uniform, means only once. Uniform resource locator. So this thing is called as a resource, or if you are straight accessing this PDF will become a resource. And whenever this resource is not available on the server or this function is not available, remember that this function is also resource. This web app is also resource, right? Everything on the server other than even this web server is also resource. Whatever available on the server, right, that can be accessible over the internet, that is a resource. So this function is also resource, this is also resource, this is also resource, this web app is also resource. Okay. Now when client want to access particular image, client has to have what? URL, uniform resource locator. Resource, focus is on the resource, remember that. Now if resource is there, means hello img function is there. Internally hello img function is going to use fs node package to read the data from the file. It reads the data and get back to you by means of this web server app over here, right? And sometimes what happens, you try to access hello img, I try to access hello img1 which is not available. At that time web server tries to go in a web app tries to find hello img1 and says that I'm not getting it. So it becomes what? 404. Web server returns 404 to the client. Now there are responses, right? Let me delete. I hope you got this idea what exactly it is.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now here your responses start from, you can say if response 200, right, it represents success, means my request has been reached to the server, it has been processed and came back. Response types I am saying, like a 400 there are these many response types. Okay. Then you have 300 which says that redirection, means I don't have the particular resource on my file system, I am redirecting to some another server. Third thing, 400, 4xx, instead of we can say 3, there are multiple actually, 3xx and 2xx, 201 is there, 200 is there, 301 is there, 404 is there, 400 is there, 403 is there. So anything that starts from the server is related to request, problem in request, remember that, it represents problem in request. What it represents? Problem in request. Then there is something called as 500, 500 or 5xx. If your response start from the 5, response status start from the 5, which means that, so there is a function, right? Function communicates with the file system and gives you data. Means at that time, whenever that function is getting executed and it does some processing, right, and at that time it gives you some error, the 5xx represents that error, server error. Means whenever server is trying to do some processing, at that time it is getting some errors. Whenever it tries to process something, right, in one of the function, that function is mapped to the URL, and you get error, at that time you can say this 5xx, you will get it 500. Generally you will find the error 500. Now what are these? These are the response types. I'll show you again. Just go here. Just go here. Now just refresh it again. Can you see here 304, 200? These are the response status. 304, 200, 200. These are the response status. And we discussed what do you mean by 2xx, this 3xx, then 4xx, right? Means whenever server goes from client, whenever request goes from client to server, it has some body, it has some headers. Body is nothing but data related to the request. It go to the server, it enters the web server, from the web server it enters the web app, right? It processes the data and accordingly it gives you response back. Response is also having body, remember that. Response is also having its own body. Response is also having its own headers. So request, response. Request has what kind of request I need to make: get, post, put, options, delete, patch, head. Response, what kind of response I want to return: 300, 400, 200. Response types, right? And who decides that response types? Your server processing. Whenever you process, at that time you need to decide all these things. We just have discussed HTTP methods. We just have discussed HTTP requests. We just have discussed what HTTP methods. We just have discussed HTTP requests and responses. But what is HTTP? We haven't discussed yet. Okay. Okay. So when you talk about HTTP, let me go to the Google and TCP IP model. If you are from the networking background or the computer engineering background, right, you might have studied this thing. TCP IP model. In the TCP IP model, means what happens? This TCP IP model is inside your one of the computer. All the computers who have connected to internet, right, they have this thing, TCP, they follow the TCP IP model. What is the TCP IP model? Every networking machine would be having application layer, transport layer, internet layer and network access layer. They would be having network access layer, internet layer, transport layer and application layer. They would be having. Means one computer would be having this thing. I'll get some another image. TCP IP model. TCP IP model communication. Yeah, this is correct. Host your laptop and your web server. Let's open this image in a new tab. Now you are starting a request. That request goes to the application layer, transport layer, internet layer, data link layer, then here media for the data, for example hardware, your physical thing, Ethernet, then it again goes to the another machine's data link layer, network layer, transport layer, application layer, and it reaches to the another web server, right? Now if you see in the application layer, they have written one protocol. Protocol means what? The way or the structure you will communicate, the pattern in which you will communicate with the how two machines are going to be connected. There are multiple things. COAP is there, MQTT is there, TCP is there, right? Then gRPC is there. Many when you talk about how two computers are going to communicate, two computers are going to communicate with each other by means of different protocols, and one of the application layer protocol is widely 95% used is HTTP. So your everything will be happening on the HTTP. Everything is happening on the what? HTTP. So HTTP is a text transfer protocol, right, which works at the application layer of your TCP IP model. At what? Your TCP IP model. Now TCP IP model is a standard structure of transporting the data, or it's a layered architecture from where your data is going to be transported from one machine to another machine. That's all about networking is, right? From one machine to another machine. Okay, and that is nothing but what HTTP is. HTTP is a protocol which defines the standard how two machines would be communicating with each other. So what HTTP says, I am going to work on request and response. Second thing, if you want to request, I would be requiring the request headers, I would be requiring the request body. Okay. Third thing HTTP says, protocol, these rules, I am going to send the response. Response would be having its own headers, response would be having its own body. Response can be sent in 5 to 6 different formats like 200, 300, 400. Right? Request can have different methods. Each method would be having its own significance. Right? If you want to get something from the server, you need to call get. If you need to delete something from the if you want to delete the resource from the server, you need to use delete method. Like that. That is nothing but what HTTP protocol is. Now this is about what you can say fundamentals of HTTP. These are nothing but what? Fundamentals of HTTP. Now next part is that Node.js, right, is a node runtime. Node.js is not a node runtime, is a framework which is written on the top of V8 Chrome engine that has created a built-in capability of communicating with what? HTTP layer or HTTP protocol. And how that works, we are going to, whatever we have discussed so far, request is having body, request is having headers, request is having data, request is having method, right? Response is having type, response is having header, response is having body. All that things they have implemented, whatever is a theory they have defined over here, all that thing they have implemented over here, and we'll see this thing, right? But it's recommended that most of the people don't use this package, right? People go to the Express.js, is one of the fantastic utility which is HTTP only, a flavor of HTTP only, but which has a lot of additional features than HTTP. And see, this is built on the top of this only. This is a raw level. This is at the core. This is the raw thing, right? So we will see how exactly this works in a moment. But before that, I'll request you to go through these few pages, and you can ask me the queries if you have any.
Sir, if you don't pass the path in URL, so what will be the default page
See,
that
it's a index page, front page. If I don't pass anything, that would be the index page. Correct? If you see here, if I don't pass anything, this is my website and working on the Apache. If I don't pass anything, it will go to the root. If I don't pass anything, it will go to what? Root. And it will give you the root. Remember that it is not there, browser is remaining, but there is a forward slash. Forward slash is the path only. Correct?
Yes.
Forward slash, it is not, you cannot see, right? But it is there. The forward slash is one of the path you have configured in your web app. If only forward slash is there, please call this function and return this. Like that.
Okay.
Correct?
Okay, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
You are reading that file, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Just go through it and ask me question in 1 minute, 2 minutes.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes, sir. I'm done with.
Okay. Vikas?
Yes, sir. Okay. Done.
Okay. Now, let's try to build a basic HTTP server, very, very basic HTTP server. Let's try to build very, very basic HTTP server, and I can say main.js, main basic http.js. Very, very basic HTTP server. So first, what you would be requiring, you would be okay. So before, what you can say, so what we need to do, let's try to, what you can say, make a request. Let's try to make a, I'll follow this thing, then we will build our own HTTP server, right? So first what we will do, so what it is doing, let me tell you, this function is making HTTP request by means of code, right? By means of code, it is making HTTP request to one of the server. Let's try to do that. Now I would be requiring this first, right? So let's have const and require the HTTP, const and require the HTTP. Okay, now what we need to do, we need to make one HTTP call. We need to make one, can you see options you can pass like this, random org is available there. This is a host and this is a path, right? This is a host and this is a path. Let's try to get this. So you are saying that I would like to talk with this, and which path I would like to follow. I would like to, we'll discuss what this exactly, don't worry, and make it const. Okay, okay, then you just need to perform the request, HTTP request dot request, here options, that above options, and one function, and here we can say this is a response, and let's try to console it. Console.log response. Okay, let's try simple get request we are trying to make, and let us see what happens. cd day 7 node host random org throw error, unhandled event error. What they are saying? Unhandled event error. Okay, dot end, you need to call this, you need to end the request. Can you see some response you are getting? Something you are getting over here, it is printing this response object. So you have made a standard HTTP GET request, and things related to HTTP GET you can find here also. This is your incoming message. Right, this is your standard response. Remember that you have printed response object. Okay. Now can you see response underscore header? If you want to have headers, you can have these things. And can you see headers over here? You can have these many headers are available from the response. And see, this is a detailed response object you can see over here. So you have performed simple get call. You have performed simple get call on which server? Random org, and this is actually there. If you see, okay, if you just, let's try to just copy this. It is actually live. Yeah, you can see 10. It gives you a random number, random integer. Number is 1 and minimum is 1, something like that. You have given that particular number and it is doing like this. Okay. So you can say this is about simple get call. Means if there is any HTTP server and if you want to make a get call, you can do like this. Now still you are not able to read this 10 number. Still you are not able to read this 10 number. This is actual response, remember that. So this is actual response given to you by server. But instead of showing that, it is showing a long big thing which is not technically a response. Which is not technically a response. The response is something different. Okay. Now what it says that? It says that if you want to read it, you need to use one event. Can you see that event is nothing but what? Data. That event is nothing but data. And can you see this is a stream? That is a chunk you are getting, and that chunk you need to read. Okay. Now let's try to add these two features. I'll commenting it out because it is very huge. Response.on. Two events are there. If you remember last time we have events, and here you can have data chunk. I'm passing function like this, and we have response.on data, and another one is response.on end. So here you need to start reading the data. Here can you see here this guy has created a string variable, and on the end it has printed. Means it chunk is going to come time to time, is an event. If you remember last time, stream is there, it's kind of stream. So you go here and define var str or let str is equals to empty, correct? And here we can say dt plus equals to chunk. Dt plus equals to what? The particular chunk. Here there is a nothing on the end, and you just need to console.log this dt. Okay, let's try to run it now again and see. Presently it's not printing anything. dt plus equals to chunk, okay, on data on end, and this is the callback we are passing. Let dt chunk, or let's try to print this chunk, what exactly it is. Let us see. Console.log chunk. It's not printing anything, and what might be the reason? Response dot on data, response dot on end. Let me remove this end. No, it won't work in this way. Dot end is required. But right now it is not printing any chunk. Response dot on data, two events are there. Response dot on data, response dot, another chunk of data has been received, append to str. The whole response has been received, so we can print it here, str. That is correct. This code is correct. Whatever code we also have written, that is also correct. Require http. If you print this guy is printing the thing, which means that request has been reached to the server. Yeah, see, the request is reaching to the server, and even if you say response header, it's a 200. No, status code is a redirection. If you can see here, status code is what? Redirection 301. This might be the problem.
So what does the let keyword define here?
Yeah, let is nothing but the where. Let is nothing but the where. Do you remember we have discussed the ES6 features? Let is about scoping, right?
Yeah. Okay.
We might have discussed here let and where. Here I have used the wheres built in. Somewhere we have discussed that, correct?
Yeah, features we have discussed. Right.
Let and where. Let is nothing but what you can say. It is a scoping. It adds the lexical scoping. Yeah, let where const. Can you see here? So we have discussed here what exactly where, what exactly let. Let is nothing but what? It adds the scoping to your code, right? So if you don't add let over here, your output becomes 20, but it should be technically output is 10, correct?
Yes.
This is nothing but let and where. Clear or not?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, now let me see what's happening over here. Let dt response dot on data and end. What might be the reason? What do you think? So on the data and on the end,